जय गुरु जी संगत जी। गुरु जी की आज्ञा से पहले कल का लेट्स रिवाइज एंड लेट्स ब्रश अप। कल हमने पढ़ा था कि स्वामी रामाजी साधु सुंदर सिंह जी से मिले। और साधु सुंदर सिंह जी वो थे जिनको कंटिन्यूसली विजन आते रहे। जो विजन में उनको आवाज आती रही या कुछ जो नजर आते रहे, उनको उनको गाइड करते रहे कि यू मस्ट गो टू हिमालयस। एंड व्हेन Sadhu Sundar Singh ji, when he saw a picture, he recognized that, that he's the one who awakens me and he's Christ. So he introduced Christian Bible to Swamiji and taught, that comparative study of Bhagavad Gita in the Bible. Or Sadhu Sundar ji was very, very loving, amiable, kind, and very polite person. He was a highly evolved soul. And then, we learned about the comparisons between Buddhism and Christianity. And Sadhu Sundar Singh ji walked in Christ consciousness all the time. और उसके बाद फिर हमने ये पढ़ा कि then Swamiji met Jesuit sadhu who was an educated monk and he knew several languages. He said that Christ is a state of perfection and a state of oneness and a state of truth. फिर जब स्वामी जी अमरनाथ गए तो वहां पर वह कश्मीरी पंडित जी से मिले। उन्होंने स्वामी जी को बताया कि and he claimed, that Jesus had lived in Kashmir and referred to a manuscript, which was translated by a Russian writer and then into English as The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ. फिर स्वामी जी उस अडेप्ट से मिले जो एक जगह से दूसरी जगह जाते रहते थे। He was a roving adept, एक roving साधु थे। He was a very handsome man and he was insensitive to cold and he could travel barefoot and live at elevations of 10,000 to 12,000 feet. और लोग उनको बड़े प्यार से बाल भगवान कहते थे because वो बहुत यंग एज के थे। और स्वामी रामा जी कहते वो 8 से 10 घंटे बगैर अपनी पलक झपके बैठ सकते थे, in his deep meditation, and he could levitate his body 2.5 feet during meditation. Then we learned about Garwali Sadhu, a well-known Christian mystic, and he taught Swamiji sermons on the Mount and the Book of Revelation. And he told Swamiji that he loved Christianity, but not Christianity. He said that kingdom of God is within every human being. और Christ क्या है? Christ ये है एक universal consciousness है जो सबके अंदर है. And when Swamiji was arrested by police, as he did not support the new Indian government, स्वामी जी ने बहुत अंदर से डीप प्रे किया ईश्वर को, and he had a clear vision of Jesus Christ where Jesus Christ blessed him and said, do not worry, okay, nothing bad will happen to you. And then Swamiji said that Bible contains much wisdom, though sometimes preachers, they misinterpret it and confuse it. And we learned about Judaism philosophy, that it's similar to Hinduism. And then lastly, we read about Swamiji, that how he met a sage who lived by a river and he made up his mind to cast off his body. And when he had cast off his body, people from all religions, they just started fighting over his body. And then that Swami rebuked them. He rebuked the people from different religion. He said, now I've changed my mind, I'm not going to cast off my body today. And he said, I believe in God and no one else. And he gave Swamiji a very, very big lesson. He said, जो lesson हम सबके लिए भी है, that be that which you really are. Don't pretend to be what you are not. ये बिल्कुल सही बात है। गुरु जी को भी पखंड तो बिल्कुल पसंद नहीं है। जो हम नहीं है वो हम क्यों दिखाते हैं? जो हम हैं वही हमें दिखाना चाहिए, because Guruji is so magnanimous, he's so generous. He accepts us with our he accepts us with all our flaws. तो हम किसको बेवकूफ बना रहे हैं? हम किसको पागल बनाते हैं? हमें प्रिटेंड नहीं करना चाहिए जो नहीं है। ये नहीं है कि सत्संग में बैठ के हम प्रिटेंड करें that we're really pious and very pure और बाकी जिंदगी हमारी ऐसे ही निकले। We don't have to be hypocrite, we should what we are, we should show that personality only, but yes, we must change ourselves for better. Okay, then is today the 9th chapter we're going to start, and that is divine protection. All right, so इसमें लिखा है बहुत वही जो गुरुजी हमेशा कहते हैं, सरेंडर करो। जब एक बारी मैं गुरुजी के साथ भी बैठी थी डिफेंस कॉलोनी में, तो गुरुजी बिल्कुल मेरी तरफ देखते के कहते, मुझे बोलते फेथ की हुंदा है, फेथ मैं तेरे ते कर ला, मैं इत्ते कर ला, फेथ कुछ नहीं हुंदा, सब तो बड़ी चीज हुंदी है सरेंडर। और जब आप गुरु जी पे सरेंडर कर देते हैं तो आप अपना सब कुछ समर्पण कर देते हैं उन पे। फिर आप कहते हैं ठीक है गुरु जी, दाई विल इज माई विल, मेरा अपने में कुछ नहीं है, यू नो what is best for me, you know how to go about my life, I only have to do my karma with your grace, and the result and everything you have to see. So what is best for the evolvement of my soul, because I have that myopic vision, I can't see further than that. So Guruji, you are the best, you can decide the best for my future and for my coming lifetimes. So यही है surrender. Okay. उसके बाद ये इसमें लिखा है, सेल्फ सरेंडर इज द हाईएस्ट एंड इजिएस्ट मेथड फॉर एनलाइटनमेंट, वन हु हैज सरेंडर्ड हिमसेल्फ इज ऑलवेज प्रोटेक्टेड बाय द डिवाइन पावर, one who possesses nothing and has no one to protect him belongs to God and is constantly under the protection of the divine. So बिल्कुल लिखा है सेल्फ सरेंडर ही सबसे बड़ी चीज है, और Guruji is the best the best guidance we can ever think of, we have in our life, और इसके ऊपर कुछ भी नहीं है। फिर जब हम उन पे सब कुछ सरेंडर कर देते हैं, then he becomes our savior. Okay, उसके बाद जो next chapter है that is protecting arms. Swami ji कहते हैं, I know many calm and quiet places in the lap of the Himalayas where one can live and meditate without being disturbed. Whenever I get tired, I think of recharging myself by going to the Himalayas for a short period. तो स्वामी जी को ऐसी जगह पता है हिमालयस पे जहां पर he can rejuvenate himself, he can take a break, he can take rest. One of my favorite places for such a retreat is in the district of Garhwal, 12 miles north of Lansdowne, where at the height of 6,500 feet, there is a small Shiva temple surrounded by thick fir trees. In that region, nobody eats corn without offering it to the deity of the temple. तो स्वामी जी कहते हैं वहां पर उस रीजन में ना कोई भी कॉर्न जब तक ऑफर ना कर ले अपने देवता को या जिनको मानते हैं तब तक वो नहीं खाते हैं। कहते according to the local folklore, if anyone does this by mistake, their house starts shaking and the people act in a funny way. तो उन लोगों की ऐसी नोशन है कि अगर बाय चांस कोई बाय मिस्टेक खा भी लेता है ना, तो उनका घर ऐसे शेक करने लग जाता है, ट्रैवल करने लग जाता है, and people they just act in a very ridiculous and funny manner. कहते when I first heard this at the age of 14, I had a desire to visit that temple. I thought that people create such myths out of their imagination, and that the myths then travel far and wide and are believed by everyone, though they have no basis in reality. तो स्वामी जी के अंदर वो इच्छा हुई कि नहीं मैं भी तो देखूं क्या ये मिथ है, क्या ये लोगों की अपनी just figment of their imagination, they are fabricating something, or it's for real. कहते I decided to visit that place to see for myself. I was approaching there at 7 o'clock in the evening. It had already become dark. I was traveling along the edge of a cliff. I did not have a light with me, and in those days I used to wear wooden sandals which were very slippery. I slipped and was on the verge of falling down the cliff, which was very steep, when suddenly a tall old man dressed in white caught me in his arms and brought me back to the footpath. तो जिस तरह से स्वामी जी ने वुडन स्लिपर्स पहने थे and he had almost slipped, तो गिरने ही वाले थे, कि suddenly ऐसी फिगर अपीयर हुई, बहुत tall थे, old man थे, dressed in white, उन्होंने मुझे अपने हाथों से पकड़ लिया। he said, this is a holy place and you're fully protected. I'll take you to your destination. He led me along the path for about 10 minutes until we neared a thatched cottage which had a torch burning outside. When we came to the stone wall surrounding the cottage, I thought he was walking just behind me. स्वामी जी को लगा कि वो अभी उनके पीछे चल रहे थे। कहते but when I turned to thank him, I could not find him anywhere. I shouted after him, and the sadhu who lived in the cottage heard me and came out. He was pleased to have a guest and told me to follow him to his small room where a fire was burning. तो स्वामी जी जैसे पीछे मुड़े कि चलो, I should be in gratitude, I should thank him because he saved my life and he helped me. पर स्वामी जी को कोई नजर नहीं आया, तो उनकी आवाज सुन के ही जो पास में एक साधु थे कॉटेज में, वो बाहर आए। तो वो बहुत खुश हुए कि इस तरह से अतिथि आए हैं, एंड वो उनको गाइड करके अशर करते गए अपना वे where a fire was burning. I told the sadhu about the old man who had shown me the path in the dark. I described his appearance and explained how he had saved me from falling off the cliff. तो उन्होंने बताया भी इस तरह से कोई फिगर अपीयर हुई तो किस तरह से उन्होंने उनको बचाया था। This sadhu started weeping and said, "You were fortunate, to encounter that great man. Do you know why I'm here? 7 years ago, I also lost my way at exactly the same place. It was 11 o'clock at night. The same old man took hold of my arm and brought me to this thatched hut where I now live." तो जब उन्होंने बात सुनी तो बहुत रोए, ही गॉट इमोशनल। कहते 7 साल पहले मैं भी तो आया था ना, तो मेरे साथ भी ऐसे वो जो तुम्हारे साथ हुआ, तो उन्होंने मुझे भी बचाया था। और कहते फिर उन्होंने मुझे ये जो जहां मैं रहता हूँ ना, ये ही ओनली brought no, I'm sorry, the same old man took hold of my arm and brought me to, okay, तो उन्हीं ओल्ड मैन ने इनको रास्ता दिखाया था जहां पर ये अब रहते हैं, थैच्ड हट में। कहते जब मैं जहां रहता हूँ, कहते I have never seen him again. I call him Siddha Baba. His loving arms have also saved me. तो इन्होंने बड़े प्यार से उसका नाम सिद्धा बाबा डाल दिया। कहते the next morning I searched the whole area but did not find any such man. I went to the cliff and saw the marks where I had slipped. I often remember those loving arms that protected me from falling from the cliff. It was a very dangerous place, and had I fallen, there would have been no chance for my survival. तो उन्होंने यही बताया, कहते मेरा कोई सर्वाइवल का चांस नहीं था because it was such a perilous and dangerous place. और अगर वो ना बचाते तो I wouldn't have been alive. कहते later I talked to the villagers about my experience, and they all knew about this Siddha. They believe that he protects their women and children in the forest, but none of the villagers have seen him. तो सब वहां के जो villages थे, उनको सबको उनके बारे में पता था, पर उन्होंने देखा नहीं था, उनके बारे में सुना जरूर था। कहते during the time I was strictly following the austerities and instructions given to me by my master. I did not possess or carry anything with me. My experience has often confirmed the belief that those who have nothing are taken care of the divine. तो वही है ना, इसमें वही ये कहते जिनके पास कुछ नहीं होता ना, उनकी ईश्वर जरूर रक्षा करते हैं। कहते the thatched cottage in which the sadhu lived was just 100 yards from the small Shiva temple. The temple was in a little clearing in the woods and was surrounded by tall fig trees. That place was highly charged and spiritual vibrations, with spiritual vibrations. दोस्त वो शिवा टेम्पल की बात कर रहे हैं कि वो ऐसी positive place थी, so pious that it was fully charged with spiritual vibrations. I learned that a great Siddha had lived there 600 years ago. 600 साल पहले वो रहते थे वहां पर. He instructed and guided those who lived in that area, although he remained in silence. तो कहते उनका काम क्या था? गाइडेंस करना लोगों को, और हमेशा साइलेंस में रहते थे. कहते after his death, the people built a 6-foot square temple where he lived. Inside there was a shivling. The villagers even today visit the temple once in 3 months before the new season begins to keep their memories of that great man alive. तो लोगों ने उनकी याद में ऐसे टेम्पल बनाया, और कहते वहां पर विलेजेस 3 महीनों में, मतलब एक बारी तो जरूर वहां पर जाते हैं. कहते some say it was he who saved me from falling off the cliff. I stayed in a small room near the temple for several months, remaining alone and practicing silence and certain austerities. A few years after my first visit to the temple, some Brahmins decided to build a larger, more solid and more majestic temple in place of the small old temple, which was no longer in good repair. तो वही स्वामी जी कहते हैं कि जब मैंने पहली बारी वहां गया तो उसके कुछ सालों बाद लोगों ने सोचा कि नहीं, वहां पर थोड़ा और कंक्रीट और बड़ा टेम्पल, which should look majestic, वो इस तरह से बनना चाहिए. कहते when the laborers began digging around the foundation to remove the old temple, they found that the earth was full of small snakes of various colors. तो जैसे वो शिव लॉर्ड शिवाजी का टेम्पल है, तो वहां पर कहते जैसे ही डिगिंग हुई, खोदना शुरू हुआ, बहुत 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 छोटे 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 सांप अलग अलग रंगों के थे. So they started picking up the snakes along with the dirt and throwing both aside, but the deeper they dug, the more the snakes would appear. जितना जितना खोदते थे उतने उतने सांप निकलते थे. And old women from a nearby village would come to the temple each morning and evening. In the evening, she would walk 3 miles to the temple in order to light the lamp inside. And in the morning, she would come and extinguish it. तो शाम को एक लेडी वहां पर आती थी, अपना दिया वो जला के, और फिर जब सुबह आती अपना, and in the morning she would come and extinguish it. Because she had done this regularly for several years. She didn't want the temple to be modified and want the buildings not to disturb it. तो वो यही कहते थे कि इस टेम्पल को आप क्यों रेनोवेट कर रहे हो, या इसमें क्यों चेंजेस लाना चाहते हो, इसमें कोई मॉडिफिकेशन नहीं होनी चाहिए, जैसा जैसा था वैसा ही रहना चाहिए. But the engineer who was in charge of the project didn't pay her any heed. उसने कोई ध्यान ही नहीं दिया उस औरत की बात पर. After जो इंजीनियर थे, after digging for 6 days, they found there was no end to the snakes. So they could see endless snakes. You know, the deeper they would go, the more snakes would appear. The more they removed, the more they seemed to be left. They dug around the shivling in order to move it, but found that it was buried deep in the ground. They dug down 8 feet, but could not remove it. कहते 8 फीट तक उन्होंने उसको खोदा, पर वो उसमें सक्षम नहीं हुए उसको हटाने से. On the 8th night, the engineer had a dream in which the old yogi who had wrecked me appeared. Okay. On the 8th night, the engineer had a dream in which the old yogi who had rescued me appeared with his white beard and long gown. He told the engineer that the shivling was sacred and should not be moved, and that the temple should not be enlarged. कहते फिर क्या हुआ, उस इंजीनियर मानने वाले तो थे ही नहीं, तो फाइनली क्या उनके ड्रीम में वही ओल्ड योगी आए, तो वही व्हाइट बियर्ड उनकी थी और लॉन्ग गाउन पहना हुआ था. उन्होंने यही बोला, ये शिवलिंग बहुत सीक्रेट है, बहुत होली है, पायस है, इसको मत हिलाओ और टेम्पल में कोई भी मॉडिफिकेशन मत लेके आओ. So the old temple was rebuilt to the exact dimensions in which it had stood for 6 centuries. उसके exact dimensions से उन्होंने वैसे ही बनाया जैसा 6 centuries थे वहां पर वो स्थित था. I visited this place again in the spring of 1973 with Swami Ajaya and a small group of students. We stayed there for 6 days in a small 2-storied earthen and stone house which had been built a few hundred feet from the temple. Another old sadhu lives and serves as a sort of priest to the temple there now. He's very hospitable and serves anyone who comes there. That place is very serene and beautiful. At the top of the tall hills that surround the valley, one can see the long ranges of the Himalayas, as though all the snowy peaks are tightly clinging to one another and are determined to stay firmly with eternity to eternity. तो स्वामी जी ने यही बताया ना कि वहां का जो सीनरी के बारे में बता रहे हैं, सीनिक ब्यूटी के बारे में बता रहे हैं, और जो प्रीस्ट है उस टेम्पल का, ही इज आल्सो वेरी हॉस्पिटेबल. जो भी वहां आते हैं वो उनकी सेवा में लगे रहते हैं. और टॉप ऑफ द हिल्स में उन्होंने बहुत बहुत एन्चांटिंग व्यू बताया है, स्नोई पीक्स, एंड द वे ही डिस्क्राइब्स इट सो ब्यूटीफुल दैट दे आर टाइटली क्लिंगिंग टू वन अनदर. इस तरह से जुड़ के खड़े हैं कि यस, यू नो, वी गोना स्टैंड हियर फर्मली एंड डेयर यू मूवर्स. और इस तरह से बहुत बहुत सुंदर व्यू स्वामी जी बता रहे हैं. Okay, next is Lost in the Land of Devas. Swami ji कहते हैं, I had heard and read so much about a village called Jananaganj that my desire for visiting this place became intense. Many pilgrims have heard about that place, but it is rare that someone preserves enough to reach there. This small community of spiritual people is situated deep within the lap of the Himalayas, surrounded by snowy peaks. कहते for 8 months of the year, one cannot enter or come out of the place. A small community of yogis live there all the time. तो उस विलेज की बात करें, उस गांव की बात करें जिसका नाम जनानागंज है, कहते यहाँ पर जो योगीज है ना किस तरह से साइलेंस में बैठे रहते हैं, ज्यादातर अपना समय वो मेडिटेशन में निकालते हैं। कहते small community of yogis live there all the time. These yogis observe silence and spend most of their time in meditation. Small log houses provide shelter, and the main food is potatoes and barley, which they store for the whole year. तो उनकी staple diet यही है। कहते this particular community is made up of Indian, Tibetan, and Nepalese sadhus. This small group of adepts resides on the Himalayan border between Tibet and Pithoragarh. There is no other place but this which can be called Jananaganj. I decided to go to Mount Kailas along with another 4 renunciates in order to visit the village. We went from Almora. तो स्वामी जी ने सोचा कि नहीं मुझे माउंट कैलाश पे जाना है, 4 और अलग से जो साधु थे उनके साथ। कहते we went from Almora to Darchola to Garbiang, and after several days when we reached Rakshastral we lost our way. तो वो रास्ता उनको मिल नहीं रहा था, वो गुम हो गए रास्ते में। कहते it was in the month of July when the snow melts in the Himalayan mountains. को जुलाई के महीने में मेल्ट होनी शुरू हो जाती है बर्फ। कहते during this season of the year the glaciers move and sometimes an entire glacier crashes down and blocks the path. तो कहते naturally फिर उस टाइम क्या होता है ना, ग्लेशियर क्रैश करके नीचे मेल्ट होके जब गिरते हैं तो ब्लॉक कर देते हैं रास्ता, ऑब्स्ट्रक्ट कर देते हैं। कहते for several days there may be no way to go. As we were walking we found glaciers collapsing, blocking the way behind and in front of us. I was accustomed to such sudden calamities. तो स्वामी जी कहते मैं तो आदी था इन चीजों के लिए, but the other swamis were new to these adventures. तो उन्होंने कभी ऐसी चीजें adventures कभी face नहीं किए थे। कहते the swamis were very much frightened. So they were scared to death, you know, they were so frightened. They held me responsible for this and started putting the blame on me because I was from the Himalayas. They said, you should have known better. तो स्वामी जी पे blame लगाने लगे, तुम्हें तो पता था ना, you are from the mountains, you misguided us, we have no food, the path is blocked and it's very cold, we're dying here. So they started complaining, you know, हमारे पास ना खाना है, रास्ता ब्लॉक हो चुका है, इतनी ठंड है और हम ठंड में मर रहे हैं। We were stranded there by the side of an enormous lake called Rakshastal, which means lake of the devil. Because of the melting snow and avalanches, the water started rising. By the second day, everyone was in panic. तो स्वामी जी कहते स्नो मेल्ट होने लग गई और एवेलेंचेस के कारण पानी का जो स्तर है ऊपर जाता रहा। कहते by the second day everyone was in panic and I said we not ordinary worldly people, we are renunciates, we should die happily, remember God, panic is not going to help us. तो स्वामी जी ने उनको इस तरह से उनका धीरज बंधाया। तो कहते हम तो रिनांसिएट्स है ना, तो हम क्यों डर रहे हैं, अगर हमें मरना भी पड़े तो हम खुशी खुशी मरेंगे, ईश्वर को याद करो, पैनिक होने से कुछ नहीं होगा। Everyone started remembering his mantra and praying, but nothing seemed to help. Here their faith was tested, but none of them had any. They were afraid of being buried in the snow. I started joking and said, suppose you all die, what will be the fate of your institutions, wealth and followers? So Swami ji apne mazak wale mood mein aa gaye, because Swami ji at times, you know, he could be very jovial also. Swami ji कहते अगर तुम मर गए तो तुम्हारे जो institutions हैं, इतना पैसा है, तुम्हारी इतने followers हैं, भाई उनका क्या होगा? They said, we may be dying, but first we will see that you die. तो उन्होंने भी उनके जोक को, you know, they couldn't take it. तो उन्होंने बोला ठीक है, हम तो चाहे मरे जो मर्जी हो, सबसे पहले तुम्हें देखेंगे, तुम कैसे मरोगे। कहते my jokes and my taking this situation lightly made them more angry. So Swamiji was in jovial mood, but they couldn't take it and they got more, you know, they got really vexed and they really got annoyed. Very few people know how to enjoy humor. तो बिल्कुल स्वामी जी ने बिल्कुल ठीक कहा है, बहुत कम लोगों को humor enjoy करना आता है। You know, that I don't know, because they take life so seriously. Most people become very serious in such adverse situations. Humor is an important quality that makes one cheerful in all walks of life. बहुत अच्छी सीख दे रहे हैं स्वामी जी। जब भी कोई adverse situation आती है ना, लोग पता नहीं क्यों इतने serious हो जाते हैं। humor ऐसी quality है जब आप ह्यूमर के साथ जिंदगी जीते हैं ना, चेयरफुल होके जीते हैं ना, आई थिंक इट मेक्स योर पाथ इजियर. स्वामी जी कहते हैं ह्यूमर इज एन इंपॉर्टेंट क्वालिटी दैट मेक्स वन cheerful in all walks of life. To cultivate this quality is very important. When the poison was given to Socrates, he was very humorous and made a few jokes. When the cup of hemlock was given to him, he said, "Can I share a bit of it with the gods?" Then he smiled and said, "Poison has no power to kill a sage, for a sage lives in reality, and reality is internal." So true. He smiled and took the poison. So Swami ji example de rahe hain, usse samjha rahe hain unko. कहते, I said to this renunciate, if we have to live and if we are on the right path, the Lord will protect us. वो कहते हैं कि ठीक है, अगर हमारी लाइफ में जीना है, अगर हमारी किस्मत में जीना लिखा है और हम अच्छे पद पर है, तो ईश्वर हमारी मदद करेंगे. Why should we worry? It started becoming dark, and again snow started falling. Suddenly, a man with a long beard, wearing a white robe and carrying a lantern, appeared before us. He asked, "Have you lost your way?" तो फिर एक उनके सामने एक ऐसे आदमी आए जिनकी बहुत लंबी दाढ़ी थी. उन्होंने भी व्हाइट कलर का रोब, सफेद रंग का रोब पहना था. उनके हाथ में वो लैंटर्न थी. तो उन्होंने बोला, क्या हो गया, तुम्हें अपने रास्ते से खो गए हो? कहते, for almost 2 days we had nothing to eat and we did not know how to get out of this place. We replied, he told us to follow him. There had seemed to be no way through that avalanche, but when we followed him, we eventually found ourselves on the other side. तो उनके पीछे पीछे उन ओल्ड मैन के पीछे जाते रहे जिन्होंने इनको रास्ता दिखा दिया. कहते, he showed us the way to a village which was a few miles away and instructed us to pass the night there. He then suddenly disappeared. ये हो सकता है वो ही हूँ जिन्होंने स्वामी जी को पहले बचाया था. कहते, we all wondered who he was. The villagers say that such experiences are not uncommon in the land of Devas. जो villages थे ना, वो कहते थे ऐसे experiences है ना, they're not uncommon in the land of Devas. Okay. कहते, these bright beings guide innocent travelers when they lost their way. कहते, ये जो ऐसे है ना, जो bright और इस तरह के जो गाइड हैं, वो किस तरह से जो भी यात्री आते हैं, कोई भी मुसीबत होती है ना, इन ब्राइट बीइंग्स की, probably really high elevated souls which take the form of human beings to guide them. Okay, we stayed in this village that night. The next day, the other four renunciates refused to travel with me. They all turned back. They did not want to go further. तो वो लोग तो जो बाकी renunciates से वो तो डर गए. उन्होंने सोचा अब हमने ट्रैवलिंग नहीं करनी, we can't take the perilous journey anymore. तो वो तो वापस चले गए. They didn't want to go further into mountain because they feared more dangers. Because Swamiji has always been very, 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 valiant, and he has always emanated strength and positivity. Okay, after being given directions by the villagers, I went all alone toward Zanganj. तो स्वामी जी को कुछ कोई भी चीज रोक नहीं पाई. स्वामी जी went further with his invincible spirit. कहते, one of the sadhus there was kind enough to give me shelter, and I stayed for 1.5 months. This place is surrounded by high snowy peaks and is one of the most beautiful places that I have ever seen. तो स्वामी जी कहते, ऐसी सुंदर जगह मैंने आज तक नहीं देखी, because it was surrounded by snowy peaks. कहते, returning from Zanganj, I came back by the way that leads to Mansarovar at the foot of Mount Kailas. I met many advanced Indian and Tibetan yogis. For a week, I lived in a camp of lamas at the foot of Mount Kailas. I still treasure this experience. I traveled to Garbiyak with a herd of sheep. The shepherds with whom I traveled talked about the beings who guide travelers in the Himalayas. They narrated many such experiences to me. तो स्वामी जी ने उन shepherds के साथ बहुत सारे experiences share किए भी किस तरह से ऐसे होता है ना, जो beings guides बन के आते हैं. तो कहते उन्होंने भी इनके साथ share किए. कहते, these beings are called devas or bright beings. It is said that the devas are the beings who can travel between both the known and unknown side of life. They can penetrate through physical existence to guide aspirants, and yet they live in non-physical plane. तो ये जो देवास है, कहते वो अपनी physical existence बना लेते हैं क्यों, guide करने के लिए ना. Otherwise they live in a non-physical plane. The devas too have the plane of existence, Esoteric science and occultism talk much about such beings, but modern science dismiss this theory, saying that such beings are either fantasies or hallucinations. तो साइंस तो इन चीजों को तो इन्होंने बताया, वो तो सोचते हैं कि नहीं, इट्स लाइक hallucinations, एंड ये तो किसी इंसान की अपनी कोई फैंटेसी है, वो नहीं मानते इन चीजों को कहते हैं। I've heard young scientists saying that old men who believe in the existence of such beings must be hallucinating. Old age is another childhood which is full of follies and can give hallucinations, but spiritual people become more wise in old age. That they have no chance to hallucinate, for they purify their minds first and then experience the higher levels of consciousness. स्वामी जी बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे हैं, कहते ऐसे तो कोई चीज नहीं कि हेल्यूसिनेशन होती है। जब स्पिरिचुअल पीपल जब ओल्ड एज में जाते हैं, वो और विजडम उनमें और बढ़ती रहती है। The scientists have not studied many dimensions of life as yet. They are all still studying the brain and its various zones, the aspect of psychology which is termed transpersonal or transcendental psychology is beyond the grasp of modern scientists. The perennial psychology of the ancients, which has been cultivated for several centuries in the past, is an exact science. It is based on the finest knowledge, which is called intuition. The physical sciences have limitations, and their investigations are only in the gross levels of matter, body, and brain. ये बिल्कुल ठीक है, जो फिजिकल साइंस उनका दायरा बहुत लिमिटेड है, वो तो उनके अपनी ही limitations हैं, वो they don't talk beyond the levels of matter, body, and brain. They don't know that there are different dimensions. Life is much, much, much more than their scientific experiments. उसके बाद next chapter है the land of Hamsas. कहते हैं, of all the places, Swami ji कहते हैं, of all the places I have visited in my life, I have found none more fascinating than Gangotri. So Swami ji seems to be totally in love with this place, Gangotri. He says that, I've been to a lot of places, I've been to ample of places, but this is the most beautiful and, the most ravishing places. One of the most ravishing places he has seen so far. It is a land of the Hamsas, with the mountain peaks are perennially blanketed with snow. When I was young, between 30 and 50 yogis lived there in small caves along with both sides of the Ganges. Most of them did not wear any clothes, and some did not even use fire. For 3 full winters, I lived there by myself in a small cave, some 500 yards away from the cave where my brother disciple was staying. I rarely communicated with anyone. Those of us who lived there would see one another from a distance, but no one disturbed anyone else. तो स्वामी जी अपना एक्सपीरियंस बता रहे हैं, जहां भी ऐसे रहते थे, कोई भी किसी को डिस्टर्ब नहीं करता था, एक दूसरे को दूर से देखते थे, क्योंकि किसी का भी कोई मन नहीं था सोशलाइजिंग में ना, एक दूसरे को मिलने से। No one was interested in socializing. That was one of the most fulfilling periods of my life. I spent most of my time doing yoga. I spent most of my time doing yoga practices and living on the mixture of wheat and gram. I would soak the wheat and gram, and when it germinated after 2 days, add in a little salt. That was the only food I took. So Swami ji अपना वो बता रहे हैं किस तरह से वो वीट और ग्राम को लेके सोक कर देते थे, और जब वो अंकुरित हो जाती थी तो थोड़ा सा सॉल्ट डाल के वो खाते थे. That was the only diet he had at that time. It is a nearby cave. In a nearby cave lived a sage who was widely respected throughout India. His name was Krishnashram. One night, at about 12 o'clock, I was overwhelmed by a deafening sound as if many bombs were exploding. It was an avalanche. So Swami ji कहते, very close by, I emerged from my cave to view what had happened. It was a moonlit night, and I could see the other bank of the frozen Ganges where Krishnashram lived. When I saw where the avalanche occurred, I concluded that Sri Krishnashram had been buried beneath it. I quickly put on my long Tibetan coat, took a torch, and rushed to his cave. The Ganges, there is just a narrow stream, so I crossed it easily and found that a small cave was quite safe and untouched. He was sitting there smiling. So Swami ji to apni थोड़ा स्वामी जी को ऐसा लगा कि कुछ mishap ना हो गया हो, but to his amazement he saw that Swami was sitting so quietly and smiling. He was not speaking at the time, so he pointed upward and said, Then he wrote on a slate, "Nothing can harm me." तो उन्होंने कुछ बोले नहीं, बस इस तरह से साउंड सा किया, तो उन्होंने स्लेट पे लिखा, मुझे कुछ भी नुकसान नहीं हो सकता। कहते I have to live for a long time. These noises and avalanches do not frighten me. My cave is protected. तो स्वामी जी ने पूरे अपने पूर्ण विश्वास से बोला, जिनको देखने स्वामी रामा जी गए थे, कि नहीं, मैं इन चीजों का आदी हूँ, ये जो एवलांचेस होते हैं मुझे बिल्कुल भी इनसे डर नहीं लगता, मेरी केव बिल्कुल प्रोटेक्टेड है। Okay, Kete, seeing that he was unharmed and in good spirits, I returned to my cave. In the morning, when I could see more clearly, I found that the avalanches had come down on both sides of his cave. The tall fruit trees were completely buried. Only his cave remained undamaged. तो देखिए कितनी दिव्य शक्ति होगी इन स्वामी जी की प्रार्थनाओं में, उनकी मेडिटेशन में, कि इनकी इतनी डिवाइन कैनपी ईश्वर ने उनको दी कि दोनों तरफ से तो एवलांचेस थे, but उनकी his cave was undamaged. Nothing happened to his cave, as if it was totally under divine protection. I often visited Krishnashram from 2 to 5 in the afternoon. I would ask him questions and he would answer on the slate. His eyes glowed like 2 balls of fire and his skin was as thick as an elephant's. तो स्वामी जी उनको डिस्क्राइब कर रहे हैं कि उनकी आंखें कैसी थी, ऐसे लगता था जैसे आग निकल रही हो, और उनकी skin now, it was as thick as an elephant's. He was almost 80 years of age and very healthy. Even despite being 80 years of age, he was hale and hearty. I wondered how he was able to live without any woolens, fire, or protection from the cold. He had no possessions at all. A Swami who lived half a mile up toward Gomukh regularly brought him some food. Once a day, he ate some roasted potatoes and a piece of whole wheat bread. Everyone there drank green tea mixed with an herb called Ganga Tulsi. The yogis and the swamis whom I met there taught me many things about herbs and their uses, and also discussed the scriptures with me. Those yogis did not like to come down to the plain of India. Every summer, a few hundred pilgrims would visit this shrine, which is one of the highest in the Himalayas. In those days, they had to walk 96 miles in the mountains to reach there. If anyone wants to see firsthand the power of spirit over mind and body, he can find a few rare yogis there even today. कहते इस तरह के yogis अब भी हैं, जिनमें इतनी पावर है, the power of spirit over mind and body, जो हर चीजों से परे हैं. Okay, the next chapter is an atheistic Swami. There was a Swami who was learned and highly intellectual. He did not believe in the existence of God. So finally Swami ji को ऐसा भी मिला, एक नास्तिक जो ईश्वर में नहीं मानते थे, विश्वास नहीं रखते थे. Whatever someone else believed in, he would try to undermine with cleverly formulated arguments. तो जो नास्तिक होते हैं वो arguments में तो सबसे आगे होते हैं. Many scholars avoided him, but he and I were good friends. I was attracted to him for his learning and logic, because he seemed to be quite he gave good reasoning. He just believed in logic and reasoning. Okay, his entire mind and energy were focused on only one thing, how to argue. He was learned and obstinate. Swami ji, he was quite a headstrong and very stubborn and obstinate. And he would say, I don't know why people don't come to learn from me. And I would tell him, you destroy their beliefs and their faith, so why should they come? वो स्वामी जी कहते, जिनको ये मिले इंटेलेक्चुअल स्वामी को कि हाँ भाई पता नहीं लोग मेरे पास क्यों नहीं सीखने आते, तो स्वामी जी कहते आए कैसे, जो तुम्हारे पास आए तुम तो उनके फेथ को ही खत्म कर दोगे, so why should they come? They're afraid of you. He was a well-known man. He had written a book in which he attempted to refute all the classical philosophies. It's a good book, a wonderful book for mental gymnastics. It is called Khat Darshana, or 6 Systems of Indian Philosophy. The Tibetan and Chinese scholars admired him as a logician and invited him to China. They apparently decided that if there were any learned men anywhere in India, it must be this man. He did not believe in God, yet he was a monk. He used to say that he became a monk to refute and eliminate in order of monks. They are all fake. कहते मैं तो ये जो बना भी हूं ना, मैं मंक बना हूं ना, ये जो मंक्स है ना, ये जो फेक वाले, ये सब फेक है, मैं इनको सब खत्म करने के लिए मैं खुद भी मंक बना, ये रास्ता मैंने अपनाया. कहते he would say they are a burden on society. I have found out that there is nothing genuine in it, and I'm going to tell the world. He vowed that if anybody could convince him that there was a God, he would become that person's disciple. उसने बोला मुझे कोई विश्वास तो दिलाए कि ईश्वर है तो मैं उसका शिष्य बनने को तैयार हूं. Once he asked me, do you know my vow? क्या तुम्हें पता है मैंने क्या कसम क्या ओथ ली है? I replied he would be the greatest fool who would make you a disciple. He asked, what do you mean? I said, what can anyone do with your silly mind? You have sharpened your mind in one way, but you have not known any other dimension. He retorted, you are the silly one. You also talk of unknown dimensions. This is all rubbish, fantasy. So he was like, oh, what all crap you're talking to me? You know, it doesn't make any sense to me. So Swami Ji कहते, I prayed to God and said, no matter what happens, if I have to lay down my life, I will make this man aware of some deeper truth. स्वामी जी ने ईश्वर को प्रार्थना करी, अगर मेरी जान भी चली जाए तो कोई बात नहीं, मुझे इसको डीपर ट्रूथ जो सच्चाइयां है ना वो बता के ही जाना है. One day I asked, have you seen the Himalayas? He replied, no, I never have. I told him in the summer it's pleasant to travel in the mountains. They're beautiful. I was hoping that if he came with me, I would find an opportunity to set him right. तो स्वामी जी तो ये चाहते थे ना कि किसी तरह उसको सच्चाइयों का बता सके. He said, that's one thing I would love. With such beautiful mountains, why do we need God? I thought I'll force him into a situation where he has to believe. स्वामी जी कहते हैं मैं कुछ सिचुएशन ऐसी ला दूंगा ना कि ये अपने आप ही मानेगा. I plan to take him to one of the high mountains with a small tent and some biscuits and dried fruits. We left for Kailas. It was in the month of September when the snow starts. I firmly believed in God and I prayed to the Lord to create a situation in which the Swami would be helpless and then cry for God's help. स्वामी जी कहते मैंने ईश्वर से प्रार्थना की कि इस तरह की सिचुएशन आए कि इतना ये मजबूर और हेल्पलेस हो जाए ना कि और इसको ईश्वर को पुकारना ही पड़े. I was young and reckless, so I took him on an arduous path. I myself did not know where we were going, so we soon were lost. I was born in the Himalayas, so I have developed a resistance to cold. There is a special posture and a breathing technique which helped to protect me from the cold. But the poor Swami shivered painfully because he was unaccustomed to the mountain cold. So Swami ji ko to wo sari kriyaएं pata thi na कि ताकि ठंड से बचा जा सके. But that man was naive. He had no idea. So he was really, really shivering with cold. Out of the compassion and to show that I loved him, I gave him my blanket. I took him up to the height of 14,000 feet. After 14,000 feet, he complained, I can't breathe properly. So that man, started having problems. He felt breathless. He said, no, I can't breathe properly. I told him, I don't have any difficulty. He said, you're a young man, so it doesn't affect you. I said, don't accept defeat. Har mat mano. Every day he would teach me philosophy and I would charm him by talking about the mountains. I would say, what a beautiful thing to be so close to nature. After we had been walking in the mountains for days, 4 दिन चलने के बाद बर्फबारी शुरू हो गई. It started snowing. We camped at a height of 50,000. We had only a small tent 4 feet by 5. When it had snowed up to 2 feet, I said, do you know that it will snow 7 to 8 feet, our tent will be buried? तो स्वामी जी ने तो उसको बताना शुरू किया, अभी तुम्हें पता है जब बर्फ पड़ेगी तो 7-8 फीट तक ऐसे जाएगी तो हमारा टेंट तो बिल्कुल ही bury हो जाएगा and will be buried inside the tent. And that man had jitters, he started feeling so scared. He said, don't say that. It was like, good gracious, don't say that. He explained. I said, it's true. Then he said, can we go back? I said, there is no, Swami Ramaji ne kaha, there is no way, Swamiji. What shall we do? Then he said, what shall we do? So Swamiji कहते, I replied, I'll pray to God. He said, I believe in facts. I do not believe in the silly things you're talking of. I said, by the grace of God, the snow will stop. So Swamiji to पूरी लगन से थे कि मैंने इसको तो मनवा के रहना है. तो स्वामी जी कहते, by the grace of God, the snow will stop. If you want to use your philosophy and intelligence to stop it, you are welcome. Just try. तो स्वामी जी ने बोला कि ठीक है, तुम तो बड़े philosophical बंदे हो ना, and you think you have that gray matters, so आप तुम अपनी intelligence लगाओ, तो उसको रोक के दिखाओ, just try. He said, how will I know if your prayers work? Suppose you pray and the snow stops, even then I won't believe in God. तो कहते, मैं नहीं मानने वाला. तुम सोचोगे तुम पाठ करोगे, प्रे करोगे और स्नो रुक जाएगी तो मैं तब भी नहीं मानूंगा ये ईश्वर ने किया है, because the snow might have stopped anyway. तो हो सकता है वो अपने तरीके से रुकी हो। कहते the snow was soon 4 feet deep on all sides of the small tent and it started to feel suffocated. I would make a hole in the snow so we could breathe, but it would soon close again. I knew that something was sure to happen. Either we would die or he would believe in God. तो स्वामी जी कहते ये तो होके रहेगा, यहाँ तो हम मर जाएंगे या तो फिर ये ईश्वर को मानेगा। Finally it happened. He said, do something. Your master is a great man and I've insulted him many times. Perhaps that is why I'm now being put through this torture and danger. He started to become frightened. तो वो जो स्वामी थे वो कहते जो तुम्हारे जो मास्टर है ना वो तो बहुत ही ऊपर के पहुंचे हुए हैं, बट मैंने उनकी बहुत इंसल्ट की और मुझे लग रहा है शायद इसी चीज का मुझे फल मिल रहा है, या मुझे I'm going through this such arduous time. Okay, they started to become frightened. I said, if you pray to God in 5 minutes, the snow will stop and there will be sunshine. So Swami ji ने पूरी determination से बोला, कहते अगर तुम 5 मिनट भी पाठ करना शुरू करोगे ना, ईश्वर को प्रे करोगे ना, ये रुक जाएगी और धूप निकल आएगी, धूप की किरणें आ जाएंगी। कहते if you don't, you will die and you will kill me too. God has whispered this to me. ईश्वर ने ये मेरे को whisper करके बताया है। He asked, really? How are you hearing this? I said, he's speaking to me. He began to believe me. Finally, he started to believe Swami Ramaji. He said, if there is no sunshine, I'm going to kill you because I'm breaking my vow. I have only one basic unconditional vow, and that is not to believe in God. Yet under pressure of the fear of death, such a man reverses himself and quickly acquires great devotion. He started praying with tears in his eyes, and I thought, if the snow doesn't stop in 5 minutes and he will harden his heart even more. So I also prayed. अब तो स्वामी जी को भी अंदर से होने लग गया कि नहीं, अब तो ये भी प्रे करने लग गया है, पूरे his eyes got welled up. कहते अगर अब बर्फ नहीं रुकी ना, तो स्वामी जी कहते फिर तो ये जो ये पहले था उससे भी पत्थर दिल बन जाएगा। So स्वामी जी भी also पूरी determination लगन से पाठ करने लगे, pray करने लगे। कहते by the grace of God in exactly 5 minutes the snow stopped and the sun started to shine. You see how the Swamiji's words, because he spoke with so much of conviction, so every word has a power. तो स्वामी जी ने कहा था 5 मिनट में वो रुक जाएगी, तो वाकई ही वो रुक गई। ईश्वर ने कृपा की और धूप निकला। He was surprised and so was I. He asked, will we live? I said, yes, God wants us to live. He said, now I realize that there really must be something which I did not understand. So finally, उसने माना कि नहीं, कुछ तो ऐसा है जो मेरी समझ से परे है, which I was not able to understand. After that, he vowed to live in silence for the rest of his life. So see the transformation in that Swami, where he didn't believe in God at all. And here, how he thought of spending his rest of life in silence. That's the, colossal, I would say, transformation. He lived 21 years more and never spoke to anyone. And if anyone would talk about God, he would weep tears of ecstasy. So just imagine कि कहाँ नहीं मानता था, कहाँ कोई ईश्वर के बारे में उनके से बात करता था, वो रोने लग जाता था, that tears would come out of his eyes and start rolling down out of happiness and ecstasy. After that, he did write more books. A commentary on Mahima Stotra, Hymns of the Lord. उन्होंने किताब भी लिखी Hymns of Lord पे। कहते after we have gone through intellectual gymnastics, we find something beyond the intellect. A stage comes when intellect cannot guide us. कहते ऐसी अवस्था आ जाती है आपकी intellect आपको guide नहीं करती, and only intuition, आप intuition कहें, आप उसको subconscious mind की आवाज, subconscious की आवाज कहें। कहते only intuition can show us the way. Intellect examines, calculates, decides, accepts and rejects all that is happening within the surface of mind, but intuition is an uninterrupted flow which dawns spontaneously from its source down deep within. So Swamiji is telling about the intellect and the intuition. कहते it dawns only when the mind attains, but ये कब होती है? जब माइंड क्या होता है? स्टेट ऑफ ट्रैंक्विलिटी, बिल्कुल पीस में होता है, इक्विलिब्रियम, बैलेंस एंड इक्वानिमिटी. That pure intuition expands the human consciousness in a way that one starts seeing things clearly. Life as a whole is comprehended and ignorance is dispelled. कहते after a series of experiences, direct experience become a guide. फिर इस तरह के जब series of experiences होते हैं ना, उसके बाद जो direct experience होता है वही आपका guide बन जाता है. And one starts receiving intuition spontaneously. कहते suddenly a thought flashed into mind, and then I remembered the saying of a great sage called Tulsidasa. स्वामी जी कहते फिर उसी तरह एकदम से ही मेरे मन में फ्लैश किया वो थॉट तुलसीदास जी का. कहते विदाउट बीइंग गॉड फियरिंग लव फॉर गॉड इज नॉट पॉसिबल. Without being God fearing, love for God is not possible, and without love for God, realization is impossible. तो बिल्कुल तुलसीदास जी बिल्कुल ठीक कहा है. जब प्यार से ही सब कुछ रियलाइज होता है ना. अगर प्यार ही ना हो तो इट वुड बी इम्पॉसिबल. और गॉड फियरिंग नहीं बनना, गॉड लविंग बनना है. गुरुजी भी कहते हैं रब नु प्यार करो, रब तो डरो नहीं. डरना है तो अपने कर्मा तो डरना चाहिए है. कहते the fear of God makes one aware of God consciousness, and fear of the world creates fear and thus danger. कहते thus atheistic Swami became God fearing, where he experience God consciousness. Intellectual gymnastic is a mere exercise which creates fear, but love for God liberates one from all fears. तो वो स्वामी atheist थे ना, atheistic स्वामी, God fearing थे, पर उसके बाद उनका fear जाता रहा. कहते अब ये क्या है, कहते ये जो love for God है ना, ये आपको liberate कर देता है हर डर से. तो कैसे नास्तिक किस तरह से बहुत बड़े आस्तिक बन गए. और स्वामी जी ने भी पूरी ठान ली थी कि इनको तो मैं बना के ही रहूंगा. और स्वामी जी ने that's called the power of spoken words. तो स्वामी जी ने वो इतनी कन्विक्शन, इतने पावर ऑफ स्पोकन वर्ड्स में इतनी ताकत है कि जो बोला वो हो ही गया 5 मिनट में. ओके, सो last chapter, I think it's a big chapter. Well, let's see if we can finish it. कहते an appointment with death. अब स्वामी जी का कुछ ऐसा लाइफ में हुआ होगा कि literally maybe it's near death experience or whatever. Let's see what he has to say. Swami ji कहते the first part of the story took place when I was 7 years old, and its conclusion when I was 28. कहते when I was 7, several learned pundits and astrologers of Benares were invited by one of my relatives to consider my future. तो स्वामी जी के relatives ने ना, जितने भी astrologers थे ना, इनको बुलाया कि भी स्वामी जी के बारे में आप बताओ. कहते and Swami ji, very hilariously he mentioned that our country is famous for this science. You'll find many charlatans. कितने quacks और frauds तो मिल ही जाएंगे हमारे country में ऐसे. And you'll also find genuine astrologers practitioners. तो yes, genuine astrologers भी आपको मिल जाएंगे जिनकी calculations जो भी है अपना properly वो अपना करते होंगे. कहते if you decide to consult one before you arrive, he may write a description of your whole life, and on the front will be your name. It will be waiting for you when you arrive. Even if you have not told anyone you are going to see him, such an ability is rare. तो वो ability बहुत rare है ना, आपके आने से पहले ही सब कुछ आपका चिट्ठा तैयार हो और आपका नाम लिखा हो. कहते you will find it at only 2 or 3 places, but it's quite genuine. स्वामी जी कहते हैं सिर्फ 2 या 3 जगहों पे ऐसा होता है, पर yes, they are genuine. कहते I was standing just outside the door, overhearing what they said. So Swami ji is like, he was doing eavesdropping. He was saying, ye baat kar kya rahe hain? Main dekhu to sahi. They all said, this boy is going to die at the age of 28. They even gave the exact date. तो वो उन्होंने क्या बोला, सबने अपनी कैलकुलेशन या जो भी कहते ये तो जब 28 साल के होंगे तो ये दुनिया छोड़ देंगे. उन्होंने कहते एग्जैक्ट डेट भी बता दिया. Obviously, Swamiji was so young, and when he heard it, he got really, really, really upset. Swamiji said, I was so upset, and I started sobbing. Then I thought, oh, I have such a short span of time. I'll die without accomplishing anything. How am I possibly going to complete the mission of my life? तो Swamiji तो डर गए. कहते मेरी इतनी छोटी उम्र है, मेरे तो इतने सुनहरे सपने हैं, मैंने क्या क्या accomplish करना है. हमें तो पहले ही पता है कि स्वामी जी को पता था कि जो spiritual mission उनका पूरा नहीं हुआ था पिछले जन्म में, उसी के लिए उन्होंने जन्म लिया था. वो कहते मैं कैसे complete करूंगा? How I'm gonna accomplish it? My master came up to me and inquired, why are you weeping? तो स्वामी जी के मास्टर आए. हर पल स्वामी जी के मास्टर ने उनको गाइड किया है, उनकी रक्षा की है. स्वामी जी कहते I'm going to die. I told him. He asked, and who told you that? I said, all these people, and pointed to the astrologers gathered inside. He took hold of my hand and said, come. He took me into the room and confronted the astrologers. Do you really mean to say that this lad is going to die at the age of 28? He asked. The unanimous response was yes. Are you sure? Yes, he's going to die at that time and nobody has a power to prevent it. Astrologers कहते हैं ये उस टाइम पे इसकी मौत हो जाएगी, किसी में शक्ति नहीं है जो इसको रोक सके. Swami Ji ke master कहते हैं, my master turned to me and said, do you know these astrologers will all die before you do and you will live for a long time because I will give you my own years. तो देखिए उनकी कितनी कृपा है उनके मास्टर की. कहते तुमसे पहले तो यही सब मर जाएंगे, मैं तुम्हें अपनी जिंदगी दूंगा. हो सकता है कि उनकी जो जेन्युइन एस्ट्रोलॉजर है वाकई में ऐसा स्वामी जी के साथ होना हो, पर उन्होंने कहा, उनके मास्टर ने, तुम फिक्र मत करो, मैं तुम्हें अपने साल जो है वो दूंगा. और स्वामी जी कहते हैं, today none of them is alive, they all died before I was 28 years old. They said, how is such thing possible? My master replied, your prediction is wrong. There is something beyond astrology. ये बिल्कुल सही बात है, क्योंकि एस्ट्रोलॉजर सिर्फ प्रेडिक्ट कर सकते हैं, एस्ट्रोलॉजी से भी ऊपर है. जब गुरु की कृपा हो जाती है ना तो लेख बदले जाते हैं. Then he said to me, don't worry, but you will have to experience death face to face on that fateful day. तो उनके मास्टर ने बोला, देखो तुम चिंता मत करो, पर यस ये दिन आएगा और तुम बिल्कुल ही डेथ से तुम्हारा आमना सामना होगा, पर तुम्हें चिंता करने की जरूरत नहीं है. कहते during the intervening years I forgot all about what had been predicted. तो स्वामी जी आने वाले सालों में तो भूल गए ना भी ऐसी प्रेडिक्शन हुई थी. कहते when I was 28, I was asked by my guru to go to a mountain peak some 11,000 feet high and some 60 miles from Rishikesh, where for 9 days I performed a ritual Durga Puja. I wore wooden sandals, loin clothes, and a shawl. I carried a pot of water with me and nothing else. I used to go about freely in the mountains, chanting and reciting the hymns of the Mother Goddess. The mountains were my home. I had once climbed to a height of 20,000 feet. तो स्वामी जी अपना बता रहे हैं ना, जैसे उनके मास्टर ने कहा था कि भाई वहां जाके तुम अपना दुर्गा पूजा करो. कहते I had once climbed to a height of 20,000 feet and I was confident that I could climb any mountain without special equipment. कहते one day I was singing, स्वामी जी अपना बताने लगे हैं, कहते एक दिन मैं गा रहा था. One day I was singing as I walked alone beside a steep cliff, feeling like the Lord himself in that solitude. I was on my way to the top of the mountain where there was a small temple to worship the Divine Mother. There were pine trees all around. Suddenly I slipped on the pine needles. So Swami ji slip ho gaye wo pine needles ke upar se and began to roll karte gaye down the mountain. I thought that my life was finished, but as I plummeted downward after about 500 feet, I was caught by some thorny bush. जिस तरह से वो नीचे जाते रहे ना, तो एक thorny bush, कांटों वाली bush के साथ अटक गए. कहते a sharp branch pierced me in the abdomen. इतनी sharp branch, इतनी तीखी ना उनके abdomen के आर पार होगी, and that held me. There was a precipitous drop below, बिल्कुल steep थी ना नीचे, and the bush started swinging with my weight. First I would see the mountains and then the Ganges far below. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I saw a blood flowing with a branch pierced my abdomen. तो obviously इतनी तीखी चीज से उनके वो रक्त और खून आने लगा, but that was nothing compared to the stark imminence of death. I paid no attention to the pain because of the larger concern, the anticipation of the death. उस टाइम स्वामी जी को अपनी डेथ याद आने लगी. I repeated all the mantras I knew. स्वामी जी कहते मैंने कोई चीज नहीं छोड़ी, जितने मंत्र मुझे थे याद मैंने सब उच्चारण करने शुरू कर दिए. I even repeated Christian and Buddhist mantras. I had been to many monasteries and I had learned mantras from all faiths, but no mantra worked. स्वामी जी कहते nothing seemed to work at that time. I remembered many deities. जितने भी देवी देवता भगवान थे मैंने सबका नाम लिया. I said, oh bright being such and such, please help me, but no help was forthcoming. कहते there was only one thing which I had not tested. कहते उस टाइम सिर्फ मैंने एक चीज टेस्ट नहीं की थी, वो क्या थी? मेरी हिम्मत, my courage. So I would like to finish this chapter. कहते I am okay. जो मैंने नहीं अपनी टेस्ट की थी वो क्या थी? My courage. कहते when I started testing my courage, I suddenly remembered I am not going to die, for there is no death for my soul. तो स्वामी जी ने अपनी will power से बोला कि no, I'm not going to die. आत्मा कभी नहीं मरती, and the death for the body is inevitable, but unimportant, I'm eternal. Why am I afraid? I've been identifying myself with the body. What a poor fool I have been. स्वामी जी कहते मैं अपने आप को उस टाइम ये कोसा कि मैं अपनी बॉडी के साथ क्यों आइडेंटिफाई कर रहा हूँ. कहते I remained suspended on that bush for something like 20 minutes. 20 मिनट तक वो लटकते रहे. Then I remembered something my master had told me. He said, "Do not form this habit, but whenever you really need me and remember me." उनके मास्टर ने कहा था ना, इसको आदत मत बना लेना, जब तुम्हें सच में मेरी कहीं जरूरत पड़े तब मुझे याद करना. I'll be there in one way or another. I thought I've tested my courage. Now I think I should also test my master. कहते बहुत मेरी करेज का इम्तिहान हो गया, अब मुझे अपने मास्टर का जो बात कही थी उसको भी टेस्ट करना है. कहते this is natural for a disciple. All the time he wants to test his master. कहते he avoids facing his own weaknesses by looking for faults in his master. कहते because of the excessive bleeding I began to feel dizzy. उनका सिर घूमने लगा, चक्कर आने लगे. Everything became hazy. I began to lose consciousness. Then I heard some women on the path just above me. उनको एक women ladies की और औरतों की आवाज आई. कहते they had come to the mountains to collect grass and few roots for the animals. One of them looked down and saw me. She cried, "Hey, look at that man." I thought, if they think that I'm dead, they will leave me like this. How could I communicate to them? स्वामी जी कहते अगर मैं बिल्कुल हिला नहीं तो सोचेंगे ये तो कोई मरा हुआ है, तो मेरे को कैसे फिर वो मुझे बचा नहीं पाएंगी. कहते my head was down and my feet were upward. There were a few hundred feet away. They were a few hundred feet away. I couldn't speak, so I started waving my legs. तो स्वामी जी ने अपने presence of mind use किया, अपनी टांगे हिलानी शुरू कर दी. They said, no, he's not dead. His legs are still moving. He must be still alive. They were brave women and came down, tied a rope around my waist and lifted me up. देखो उनके मास्टर ने कहा ना किसी तरह से तुम्हें हेल्प जरूर मिलेगी. तो उनके मास्टर की ग्रेस से ही वो जो औरतें वहां से गुजर रही थी उन्होंने कैसे हेल्प की. उन्होंने उनमें से वो काफी ब्रेव थी. उन्होंने रस्सी फेंकी और इनके वेस्ट पे बांधा और इनको लिफ्ट किया ऊपर. कहते the stem was still inside me. I thought this is surely a time for courage. I pressed my stomach in and I pulled my stem out of my abdomen. तो स्वामी जी को जैसे वो उनके अंदर बिल्कुल ही पियर्स की गई थी ना वो स्टेम तीखी वाली. स्वामी जी कहते हैं मैंने अपनी स्टमक को प्रेस किया और फिर उसको मैंने जोर से निकाल दिया. कहते they pulled me up and took me to a small mountain path. They asked me if I could walk. I said yes. At first I didn't realize the severity of my condition, for the injury caused by the stem was mostly internal. They thought that since I was Swami I could take care of myself without their help. They told me to follow the path until I came to a village. Then they went on their way. फिर इनको विलेज वो पाथ दिखा के वो अपने रास्ते चली गई. I tried to walk but after a few minutes I fainted and fell. I thought of my master and said to him, my life is over. You brought me up and did everything for me, but now I'm dying without realization. कहते फिर एकदम से उनके मास्टर अपीयर हो गए. Suddenly my master appeared. I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. I said, are you really here? I thought you had left me. He said, why do you worry? Nothing is going to happen to you. Do you remember that this is the time and date predicted for your death? तो देखिए जो उन्होंने एस्ट्रोलॉजर्स ने कहा था वो सच में होके रहना था. कहते you need face death no more today. You are all right now. तो उनके स्वामी जी ने उनको ब्लेस किया कि अब तुम्हें डरने की कोई जरूरत नहीं है, तुम ठीक हो. I gradually came to my senses. He brought some leaves, crushed them and put them on the wounds. He took me to a nearby cave and asked some people to take care of me. कहते he said even death can be prevented. तो देखो उनके स्वामी जी ने क्या कहा. कहते डेथ को भी रोका जा सकता है. Then he went away. In 2 weeks time the wound was healed but the scar is still on my body. In that experience I found out how a genuine and selfless master helps his disciples even if he was far away. I realized that the relationship between master and disciple is the highest and purest of all. It is undescribable. तो ये वाकई सही बात है. गुरु जी ने भी बहुत डेथ के लोगों के डेथ को टाला है. गुरु जी कहते थे जा हुन दिखा के आ पंडित नु देख. तो पंडित ने यही कहना ना कि जो एस्ट्रोलॉजर ए बंदा तो है ही नहीं, मैं तो अपनी विद्या छोड़ दूं जो है. तो गुरु जी वैसे तो मना करते थे जाने में, बट जब उनको पता था हाँ किसकी लिखी हुई डेथ, कहते जा हुन दिखा के आ पंडित नु हुन दिखा टेवा फिर दसी. तो गुरु जी तो लेख बदल देते हैं, जिंदगी लंबी कर देते हैं और कईयों को बहुत पहले भी ले जाते हैं. if he sees that the longevity or the long life is not good for my bhagat, probably he would suffer more or he'll be on bed for a long time. He would be bedridden. तो गुरु जी की बहुत ग्रेस है, अनंतम ग्रेस है. और इसमें जो लास्ट है that's beautiful. जो रिश्ता है ना मास्टर और डिसाइपल का, गुरु और भगत का, वो हाईएस्ट है, प्योरेस्ट है, वो डिस्क्राइब नहीं किया जा सकता. तो स्वामी रामा जी ने भी कहा इवन डेथ कैन बी प्रिवेंटेड, और उन्होंने एक्सपीरियंस किया कि जो मास्टर्स होते हैं कितने जेन्युइन और सेल्फलेस होते हैं, चाहे कहीं भी हो उनकी वो मदद के लिए आ जाते हैं. सो ऑन दैट ब्यूटीफुल नोट, थैंक यू गुरुजी फॉर दिस लवली 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 रीडिंग कि और स्वामी जी के मास्टर ने कैसे उनको life the if his master's grace was not on him, probably he wouldn't have been alive, but master showered lots and lots of blessings and grace on him and gave him life. Probably he added his years to his life. So thank you Guruji, thank you Sangat ji, thank you for this beautiful reading. Thank you Ekta ji and Shilpi ji. और until tomorrow, Guruji से आज्ञा लेते हुए शुक्रिया Guruji.
Thank you, Auntie. Thank you so much for the beautiful reading. Shukrana, Guruji. Thank you, Sangat ji.